This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am Alex Masfer. I am your host. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before I start talking anything sports, I want to remind you guys to subscribe to the podcast. We would really appreciate it. That way you get all of the alerts on your phone, laptop, wherever you may be listening from when we drop an episode, and you will never miss an episode. Also, make sure to leave us a 5-star review and follow us on all social media platforms. Come interact with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you are on social media-wise, we are on as well. I hope wherever you are listening from that you and your family are happy and healthy during these times. We have a fantastic show for you guys today. It's going to be a football-heavy show. Football's been dominating the headlines the past couple of days. A little bit later on in the show, I'm going to be talking about Antonio Brown. He has come back in the news, and he could potentially sign with a team before the season starts. I'm also going to be talking about Carson Wentz, as a former teammate of his said a really interesting quote that I want to get to as well. And stick around to the end of the episode. I'm going to be giving you my top 10 NBA teams. I've done a lot of NBA lists, players, young players. I've even ranked teams who are going to the Orlando bubble in a tier system, but I haven't actually given you guys my top 10 concrete list of the best teams in the NBA, so I will be giving you that as well. But we're going to start off today's episode with the Jamal Adams situation. Now, there was a very interesting development. I think either last episode or a couple episodes ago, I talked about the Jamal Adams situation and the list of, I think the list has expanded to 8 teams that he would like to be traded to. And now I automatically assumed, like a lot of other people, that while Jamal Adams wants to win, a lot of this is about the money. The Jets don't want to pay him, which is why he would like to go to a different team. Now it has really come out that the main reason that Jamal Adams would like to leave the New York Jets is not just because of money, even though that is a factor. It is mostly because of the winning culture and winning situation. As Jamal Adams said, that he gave the Jets, right, the list of 8 teams, and usually what happens when a player who wants to get paid is, trying to get traded, they usually work out an extension with the new team he's being traded to first, so that money isn't an issue anymore, and that's the only way that the player would want to go be traded to that team. It's different in the Jamal Adams situation. He said that he would welcome a trade to those 8 teams. They consist of the Bucks, Eagles, Cowboys, Ravens, Chiefs, and a couple other teams. He would welcome a trade to one of those without needing an extension, which really just means Jamal Adams is just saying, I want to start winning football games. I want to be an NFL superstar on the biggest stage in the playoffs, and he doesn't believe the Jets can do that. In my opinion, I think he's right. I don't think the Jets can do that for one reason. Now, the New York Post also reported that one of the biggest reasons why Jamal Adams doesn't have faith in the New York Jets and would like to be traded is because of their head coach, Adam Gase. He does not believe Adam Gase is a coach that can lead the Jets to a winning championship, winning seasons, anything like that, and he might just not get along with the guy, period. And, the thing with Adam Gase is, this is going to be a little bit of a rant on him because, again, I do not believe he is a good head coach. I believe he is the worst head coach in his division right now, the AFC East. I think Bill Belichick's better than him. I think Sean McDermott of the Bills is definitely better than him. And I think Brian Flores of the Miami Dolphins is better than him. Yes, I understand last year, right, Adam Gase, when Sam Darnold, their quarterback, was in the lineup, the Jets had a winning record. The case could have been made that if Sam Darnold did not get mono last year, the Jets could have made the playoffs. But we have seen this from Adam Gase before, and the Jets have specifically seen this. They had a front row seat with Adam Gase before. I wanted to quickly remind you some things about Adam Gase and how this is an extreme parallel that he is doing exactly what he did when he was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins a couple of years ago to now, and why there is a reason why the Dolphins fired him after 3 seasons, and the Jets need to take that hint and do the same relatively soon, because he is ruining their team, just as he did for the Miami Dolphins. So let's start. Adam Gase as a head coach in total, right, is 30-34. Not good. He is not a winning NFL coach, and this is his second stint at being an NFL head coach. This is not his first team. This isn't his first organization. Like I just mentioned, he was the head coach of the Dolphins. As the head coach of the Dolphins, he went 23-35. I'm sorry, 23-25. Sorry. He went 23-25, and each season, the Dolphins got a worse record each year. So obviously in the first year, if you remember when Adam Gase was the first year as the Miami Dolphins head coach, they went to the playoffs at 10-6 with one of the easiest schedules ever. J.J., if you remember, it was his breakout season. He ran for over 200 yards in 2 games. Ryan Tannehill had kind of a breakout year as well. Jarvis Landry was on that team. Devontae Parker, Kenny Stills, a couple of other guys, and Ndamukong Suh was still on I believe he was still on the Dolphins at that time. And, of course, they made the playoffs that year, and that was, the Adam Gase hype was absolutely through the roof. Ever since then, Ryan Tannehill got hurt. If you remember, they brought in Jay Cutler, missed the playoffs. Following year, Ryan Tannehill comes back. Dolphins go 6-10, miss the playoffs again, and they move on from Adam Gase altogether. During that time period, after the first year they made the playoffs, after the Jay Cutler year, Adam Gase had a choice to make, along with the Dolphins general manager at the time. Jarvis Landry, who was one of the best receivers in the league, and was definitely the best slot receiver in the league, led the team in receptions and yards, wanted to be paid. The Dolphins organization and Adam Gase decided to part ways with Jarvis Landry, and they traded him to Cleveland for a 3rd and 5th round pick. Jarvis Landry on social media, very kind of publicly, has voiced his displeasure with Adam Gase during that situation and ever since. Another player that Adam Gase decided to get rid of because he didn't want to pay him either, J.J., as well as Ndamukong Suh. Landry, J.J., Ndamukong Suh were arguably the 3 best players on that Dolphins playoff team in 2017, and within 3 years of Adam Gase being there, they were all traded because they didn't fit the system, they didn't fit Adam Gase's culture, things like that. Now, Adam Gase also has a reputation as a head coach of not dealing with the defense. He is an offensive head coach to an extreme, and to my opinion, to a fault. You can be an offensive-minded head coach like Sean McVay, but still interact and still kind of coach up the defense with your fellow assistant coaches. Adam Gase does not do that. I know Jets fans have seen this before, and I have seen it before as well. Adam Gase, a lot of times when the defense is on the field, is on the sidelines, on the bench, not even really watching the game, drawing up plays, talking to the quarterback, which makes sense in some situations, but not the entire length of the game, where you're not even watching the defense really play. Now, let's go back to the Jets situation. The Jets are in a very, very parallel situation, and it appears to be the same thing that's happening here in New York with the Miami Dolphins. Adam Gase potentially could have made the playoffs in his first year with the Jets if Sam Darnold didn't get mono, and now people want to be paid Jamal Adams. Now, if this current projection, what it looks like it's going to happen, is that Jamal Adams is probably going to be traded. The Jets are not going to do as well as people think because the Bills are going to get better. The Dolphins got better. Who knows what the Patriots will be? Jets will miss the playoffs again. Who knows what will happen with the Le'Veon Bell situation? There's been rumors that he might want out, that Adam Gase never really signed off on the signing of Le'Veon Bell. And then all of a sudden you have lost arguably your 2 best players, Jamal Adams and Le'Veon Bell, within a 2-year span. Again, he is replicating exactly what he did with the Dolphins, with the Jets. It is as if he did not learn from his past experiences, which is not good when you are an NFL head coach. Also, there is a weird relationship between Joe Douglas, the GM of the Jets, and Adam Gase, the head coach. They were not brought in at the same time. Joe Douglas was brought in after the draft. This was his first draft. So it was weird. So Adam Gase was brought in, they kept their current GM, then their GM had gotten fired after they signed Le'Veon Bell, after they signed CJ Mosley and brought in Joe Douglas of Philly. I like Joe Douglas. I think he's a good coach. I think he actually nailed the draft this year. Mekhi Becton, Mims, a couple of other guys. I thought they had a really solid draft. I just am not sold on Adam Gase. And if the Jets don't move quickly, As in, figure out a way to keep Jamal Adams, maybe get rid of Adam Gase sooner rather than later. They could end up in a situation with what happened to the Dolphins. And yes, the Dolphins absolutely look like they're in a good position now because they got rid of Adam Gase. Adam Gase left, Dolphins did a full rebuild. They have Tua now, had tons of draft capital, tons of salary cap. Again, that makes sense. But that's not that. Who knows if the Jets could replicate that if they got rid of Adam Gase. Again, that is the reason why Jamal Adams wants to leave. He just wants to win, and it appears wants to get away from Adam Gase. It's not even about the money. And that should tell Jets fans and Jets ownership everything they need to know. When the best player does not want to play for your head coach, it's not always the player's fault. You need to go a deep dive into the locker room and investigate, what is this head coach doing? Is Adam Gase the right guy? And I think if the Jets really took the time to do that, they would find out that Adam Gase is not a great head coach. Not a lot of players get along with him. He doesn't really coach the defense. He doesn't have a winning record. And the team, whenever he kind of takes over, they have a good year promising, the first year of his contract, and they start to deteriorate from there. But my biggest takeaway from all of this is I feel bad for Sam Darnold. Now, Jamal Adams is going to get traded, most likely to a winning team, one of those 8 teams on the list. I suspect it'll be either the Dallas Cowboys, if they can somehow find the money, or if he wouldn't need an extension right away, like I mentioned. But the most likely landing spot for me is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, since they're going all in and they have the money to pay him. I expect him to be a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. Obviously, Philly's another option as well. I talked about that in my last episode. But you feel bad for Sam Darnold because he's not escaping the New York Jets. And this is what happens to a lot of young, talented NFL quarterbacks. Where you land in the NFL matters. If Lamar Jackson lands with the Browns and not the, Ravens where he actually landed, there's a different story there. Where you land as an NFL quarterback in particular matters, especially more than other positions. When you're the quarterback of a team, it is expected that you are locked in there, that you're not requesting a trade. Very rarely do quarterbacks request a trade in the fashion that Jamal Adams has done. But on the flip side, quarterbacks usually get paid without much fuss, unless you're like Kirk Cousins or something like that. Jamal Adams will be traded from the New York Jets. He will escape the losing franchise, the bad head coach that he doesn't agree with. Sam Darnold can't do what Jamal Adams is doing. He can't go out there publicly and bash Adam Gase. He can't go out there publicly and bash the Jets organization because he is the Jets organization. He is the face of that franchise. He is supposed to be the leader. He is the captain. He can't do that. And now Sam Darnold is stuck what appears on this sinking ship early in his career, which will hurt his development. If I was the New York Jets, what would I do today? I would potentially fire Adam Gase. I would seriously consider it. Yes, we're close to OTAs and everything like that, but if your best players, Jamal Adams, maybe there's some other people in the lot. I'm sure Jamal Adams is not the only person who does not enjoy playing for Adam Gase, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. If that is the case, you need to hurry up, New York Jets, before your team is ruined, before your franchise is ruined and set back for years and years. Again, I like Joe Douglas. I like Sam Darnold a lot. I like the draft they had. I like their division. Their division is not as hard as it used to be. But if you're held back from your head coach, you are going to go nowhere in this league. There are 3 things you need in the NFL today that will almost guarantee you between 8 and 10 wins at minimum. If you have a good ownership structure, if you are a franchise that has had stability in the years past, if they're a well-run organization, you have a good general manager, and you have a good head coach, and you have a good quarterback. So that's 4 things, actually. If you have those 4 things, good front office, good general manager, good quarterback, and good coach, you can make do with subpar weapons. You can make do with a subpar offensive line, a subpar defense, a tough division, a hard schedule. An example of that is the Philadelphia Eagles. Great management, great general manager, great head coach, great quarterback. They have had a poor receiving core throughout the years, not the greatest run game, a defense that's deteriorating, and a terrible offensive line for the most part in Carson Wentz's career. Yet they still find an ability and a way to make the playoffs. Same thing with the dynasty of the New England Patriots. Yes, they've had great players over the years, but for the most part, they were not as stacked as the Joe Montana San Francisco 49ers dynasty. Not as stacked as the Kansas City Chiefs who just won the Super Bowl. But they had a great head coach, great front office. Bill Belichick's the great general manager as well as head coach, and Tom Brady, and they made do with the Edelmans, the Welkers, the Jacoby Myers, the revolving door of receivers and defenders and corners and running backs and offensive linemen. That's how it works in the NFL. And if you do not have the head coach, and if your star players, again, I understand that the NFL is not a star player driven league like, let's say, the NBA is. But if your star player, Jamal Adams, at 24, is the best player your franchise has had in about 20 years, and he is saying, I do not want to play for this head coach. I do not trust this head coach to lead us to a championship, to lead me to the playoffs, to let me perform on the biggest stage. It's time to stop blaming Jamal Adams and saying he's wrong. It's time to actually look at Adam Gase. If I was a Jets fan, if I was a Jets columnist, I would be voicing my opinion and really pushing for Adam Gase to be relieved of his duties as the head coach of the New York Jets. I know it's late in the offseason, but if that is the way, and I understand that it doesn't make a lot of sense to fire a head coach just so you can sign Jamal Adams, but it's bigger than that. It's your whole team. It's the mood of the locker room. It is your future. If that's what it takes to retain Jamal Adams, who is a representation of the entire Jets locker room, then I believe it would be worth it, in my opinion. I think the Jets should explore that. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side of this break, we're going to be talking about Antonio Brown. He has resurfaced in the news. There's been some reports about some teams in the NFL considering signing Antonio Brown, so I'm going to be giving you some teams that I believe Antonio Brown could land up with before the season starts and play for this season. We're going to take a real quick break. Thank you so much for listening. It's the GSMC Sports Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you guys so much for listening so far. So Antonio Brown has been back in the news recently. He was gone for a while, and now he appears to be back. He posted some workout videos about a week ago, and now apparently, according to some NFL sources, there have been some teams, such as the Baltimore Ravens and Seattle Seahawks, that have had internal discussions about potentially signing the former NFL star receiver Antonio Brown. It'll be interesting to see if that actually happens. I am personally one of the believers that Antonio Brown will eventually make a return to the NFL. Not without a suspension. I think he will be suspended for just everything that's been going on with him. But I do believe that he is a very talented wide receiver, even still today, and I think he could actually help a team win. I do believe he will be signed eventually. What team? I don't know. I have a list of teams that I'm going to be explaining to you guys who I believe should sign Antonio Brown or should at least heavily consider it. All of these teams, I believe, also, if Antonio Brown is signed by a team, I think he'll be signed by one of these teams. But to start off, let's just get some context on Antonio Brown. Obviously, he had that fiasco with the helmet, allegations, his fee, everything with Oakland. Decided to leave, went to New England Patriots. Only played a game for them there, was obviously cut because of some allegations that came through. I don't know where he is in the legal process with all of that, I'm going to be honest with you, but it appears that if he is back into the NFL, he would serve some sort of suspension and then return to whatever team signs him. He is only 31 years old, so he is still in his prime of his NFL career. In his career, he has 841 catches, 11,263 receiving yards, and 75 touchdowns. Guys, that's Hall of Fame numbers. Even though he's only 31 years old, if you compare those numbers to some of the all-time greats, that's comparable to Jerry Rice at this age, things like that. He is a Hall of Fame type receiver. Will he get in the Hall of Fame? I'm not sure, but he is one of the best receivers in the NFL when he was in the NFL. I still believe if he came back, he'd be a top 7 receiver in the league. If he's in shape, if he's in good health, conditioning wise, everything like that. And I think he needs to go to a team that has a really good quarterback and, needs receiving help. So let's just get right into it on some teams that I believe could and maybe should sign Antonio Brown. Let's start off with one of the teams that has apparently had internal discussion, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I think the Ravens have one of the most stacked rosters in the league. It would make a little bit of sense. Antonio Brown's cousin, Hollywood Brown, is on the team. There were some pictures of Lamar Jackson and Hollywood Brown working out with Antonio Brown. If you guys remember, maybe a couple of months ago, there was some discussion then. I think Antonio Brown, if he could pick any team to play for right now, would probably be either the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who I will get into, or the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens do make a lot of sense. They know what AB is. They played against him a lot when he was with the Steelers, obviously. And if there's any area that the Ravens could use a little bit more help on, it might be the wide receiver core. And who knows, if AB is willing to take a veteran minimum to go play for the Ravens, it would make a lot of sense for him to play with Lamar Jackson. Not that the receiving core isn't good for the Ravens by any means. It's pretty decent. Snead, some other guys like that. They have a good tight end, and Mark Andrews as well, who's been Lamar's security blanket. But adding a superstar receiver with the caliber of Antonio Brown, with adding him with Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram, they just drafted the kid out of Ohio State, J.K. Dobbins as well, Mark Andrews, that great offensive line and that phenomenal defense. The Ravens are all in. They believe they can win a Super Bowl sooner rather than later, and their window to really win a Super Bowl is that window before they have to pay Lamar Jackson. Now, adding an Antonio Brown on the cheap would only help from a football standpoint. Now, are the Ravens, who are at the top of the football world right now, essentially, as potential Super Bowl favorites, are they willing to take on the risk of Antonio Brown's character, the distraction, willing to answer the questions, things like that, a potential disaster when it comes to what could actually happen? Could he get suspended again? Could he do what he did with the Raiders and force his way out? Things like that are into question. I think that's behind Antonio Brown personally. I really do believe he just wants to come back and play football and return to what he was. And again, I think he's in good shape and he's got a lot left in the tank. The Ravens make a lot of sense. For me, I just don't know if they're willing to pull the trigger considering they're already so stacked and they don't necessarily need him. Next up is the Seattle Seahawks, who also have had internal discussions. Now, this makes a lot of sense. Russell Wilson is a phenomenal quarterback. I think he is the second best quarterback in the entire National Football League, only behind Patrick Mahomes. And if you haven't been watching Russell Wilson, I highly recommend it. He's much-watched television. He refuses to get hit. He runs around, things like that. Russell Wilson has been winning with a poor offensive line, poor running game, poor weapons for the better part of a majority since the Legion of Boom kind of collapsed. He's never had a losing season in his career. Now, when it comes to receivers, they have DK Metcalf, who I like a lot. Also have Tyler Lockett, who I like a lot. But they both appear, in my opinion, more Lockett than Metcalf. Lockett's a great receiver, but I think he's a product of how Russell Wilson makes him appear to be so good. Now, if you add Antonio Brown to the mix, you have a legitimate star-driven receiver core to go along with a quarterback that appears to make every single receiver he's ever worked with really, really good. Now, Antonio Brown and the Seahawks makes a lot of sense from a football standpoint. Again, Pete Carroll has not been afraid to take on players with a little bit of risk. He's a very pro-player coach, allows his players to talk a lot, has had players like Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas. There's been a lot of backlash from that. They've all said controversial things, and that's kind of one of the reasons why, the Legion of Boom kind of melted. There was not a great relationship between Russell Wilson, Richard Sherman, things like that. If Pete Carroll is one of those coaches who would absolutely take a risk on Antonio Brown, and in my opinion, they're one of the favorites to sign him. If I could pick any team that would sign Antonio Brown, it would be the Seattle Seahawks. Unlike the Baltimore Ravens, the Ravens don't necessarily need him because their offense isn't as pass-driven as, let's say, the Seahawks are, who their entire offensive load rests on the shoulders of Russell Wilson and what he does with the football. Adding Antonio Brown is almost a need for the Seattle Seahawks. If Russell Wilson can have a legitimate receiving core with Antonio Brown, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf developing into a potential star receiver, then the Seahawks could really look to take control of the division. And like I mentioned in my last episode, they're one of the toughest divisions in the league. Cardinals only got better. San Francisco just went to a Super Bowl, and the Rams are looking to rebound. And I think the best quarterback in that division is Russell Wilson. And if you can get him some weapons, you could look to retake that division from San Francisco. Next up, I have the Green Bay Packers. Again, if any team needs Antonio Brown the most, it's the Green Bay Packers. Now, like I just said, the Seahawks could need him in theory, and he makes a ton of sense for them football-wise, but the Seahawks receiving core, in my opinion, is definitely better than the Green Bay Packer receiving core. The Packers receiving core is Davante Adams, and that's it. And I love Davante Adams. He's a top 7, maybe even top 5 receiver in the league. And again, Aaron Rodgers is just kind of like Russell Wilson, where he makes any receiver he's ever worked with good, but Aaron definitely needs a number 2 and maybe even a 1A to Davante Adams, and I think that Antonio Brown makes a lot of sense there as well. Would he be willing to go to Green Bay, a small market? Maybe they can sell him on the fact that they're a potential Super Bowl contenders, but if Antonio Brown goes to the Green Bay Packers, he will be good, and that would help Aaron Rodgers a lot. And let's not forget, Aaron Rodgers was most likely, and I can almost guarantee you, not happy with how the Green Bay Packers drafted. The Packers went quarterback and then running back. They did not get him any weapons on the outside the entire draft. They did not draft a wide receiver. They did not sign any wide receiver of significance in the offseason either. And that has to piss Aaron off. And I think Aaron Rodgers could potentially push the Green Bay Packers for a potential signing of Antonio Brown. And yes, I've mentioned this before, Aaron is most likely more leaning towards on his way out of Green Bay than retiring there as a Packer. But that doesn't mean he still wants to win in Green Bay for the time being and win another Super Bowl and boost his legacy. And Antonio Brown would help that a lot, in my opinion. He's a perfect scheme fit for Aaron Rodgers, the long, deep ball. Davante Adams is more of an everything route tree type of guy. Antonio Brown is too, but as a deep threat, he would work a lot more with Aaron Rodgers as more of a speed, take the top off the defense kind of guy, similar to his role when he was on the Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger. So I could definitely see the Green Bay Packers going after him. And in my opinion, they should sign him like right now. They desperately need more receiver help for Aaron Rodgers, and that would also cool the media and the Green Bay Packers fans clamoring for more help for Aaron Rodgers as well. Next up, I have the Minnesota Vikings. They were in those, if you remember, there was a rumor that kind of got debunked that they were willing to potentially trade for Odell Beckham Jr., so you know that they're in the wide receiver market. They obviously just traded Stephon Diggs to the Buffalo Bills for a first-round pick because they weren't willing to pay him. Now, I think Antonio Brown is probably better than Stephon Diggs and would be an upgrade. Again, Kirk Cousins is a nice quarterback, not as good as some of the ones I mentioned before, Lamar, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. I think Kirk Cousins is good, but Kirk Cousins does fall into that category of a Jimmy Garoppolo, a Ryan Tannehill, a Dak Prescott, like I mentioned in my last episode. He does need weapons around him. Kirk Cousins needs everything to go right in order to go as far as a Super Bowl potentially, and they only have one clean-cut, really solid receiver right now, and that's Adam Thielen. Not that their other pieces are good. If they can get Dalvin Cook signed to a long-term extension so he reports to camp, that would be good as well. But who knows? Maybe Dalvin Cook sits out a game or two, and then you're really lacking weapons for Minnesota. And if Minnesota's lacking weapons around Kirk Cousins is not good enough to elevate a team to win that division. The Green Bay Packers will win the division again, and the Bears with Nick Foles could clearly come close to catching up to them if they don't make some more moves. They don't line up Dalvin Cook, and they also just lost their offensive coordinator, Kevin Stefanski. So Antonio Brown makes a lot of sense for Minnesota. Get those weapons around Kirk Cousins, like I mentioned. Make sure that Kirk Cousins is comfortable, has multiple options he can go to, and he's not trying to force feed it to Adam Thielen all the time. Make it tough on defenses to scheme around all the weapons you have. Re-sign Dalvin Cook. That's how the Minnesota Vikings stay relevant and stay good. Now, let's move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who I believe are another favorites to sign Antonio Brown. Again, like I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, if any team could sign if Antonio Brown could pick any team to sign to, I think it would either be the Baltimore Ravens or Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, it's clear that Tom Brady and Antonio Brown have this somewhat relationship that no one really knows where it started, probably when he was traded to New England, but they appear to be really close friends, and Antonio Brown really wants to play with Tom Brady and continue to catch passes from Tom Brady. If you remember, Brady was not happy with Antonio Brown being cut from New England, and I think actually asked the New England Patriots to bring him back when the Patriots were kind of struggling at the end of last season. It obviously didn't manifest, and that didn't happen or anything like that. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Tom Brady, I think he already has, there's been reports of this, is pushing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to sign him. I know Bruce Arians said no, it's not a fit, but maybe his mind could change. Now, again, they have plenty of weapons. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Rob Gronkowski, O.J. Howard, Brait, Ronald Jones out of the backfield. But why not, man? Why not add more weapons for Tom Brady's arsenal? The more weapons, the better. If Antonio Brown was willing to be calm, to be, back to his normal self and take on a cheap veteran minimum type deal, I could absolutely see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wanting to do it, and I could definitely see Tom Brady desperately asking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to do it. But unlike some of these other teams, I don't think they need Antonio Brown as much. By no stretch of the imagination do the Tampa Bay Buccaneers absolutely need Antonio Brown. It's just an option that I think they could go if Tom Brady really wanted them to. Now, let's get to these last two teams. All of these teams I've mentioned have been winning teams almost guaranteed playoff teams, especially if they got Antonio Brown. And that's most likely where AB wants at the age of 31. He wants winning, he wants more stats, he wants his legacy, and he kind of wants his image to be reshaped. But I have two teams on this list who are less likely to win now, but could definitely boost his stats, his legacy, reshape his interests, and they're in the big market. And that's both New York teams. Let's start with the New York Giants. Now, the New York Giants are one of the biggest brands in football. They severely need weapons around them. Joe Judge was coming from New England, had worked with Antonio Brown in the past. Not on a positional level, and Joe Judge was the special teams head coach, but nonetheless, they were in the same building together. Daniel Jones needs help. He needs receivers. Saquon Barkley obviously struggled last year, battling injuries. And also, Joe Judge knows that in his first season, it would be great if he could make some sort of splash, if we could take a big step into Daniel Jones' development, something like that. And getting Daniel Jones a security blanket like an Antonio Brown would make a lot of sense. Now, you're probably asking, why would Antonio Brown ever want to go to the Giants? They're not very good. Well, they're on the rise. They have Saquon. Joe Judge could potentially be a good coach. I think Daniel Jones is a real player. And not to mention, maybe the Giants would be willing to spend a little bit more money to bring him in. And Antonio Brown's stats would be absolutely through the roof. Another over the 1,000-yard season. Ton of catches, ton of touchdowns. He'd be their main weapon on offense besides obviously Saquon Barkley, which would be huge for his legacy. Not to mention being in the big market of New York City as well. Can't hurt either. Now, finally, let's go to the New York Jets. Now, this is kind of the similar argument to the New York Giants. Sam Darnold has no weapons. They just lost Robbie Anderson for nothing. I don't think this is likely, and I severely doubt the Jets would ever do this. But if the Jets really want to take the next step, Tom Brady is out of the division. They should going really hard, all in, trying to win with Sam Darnold before they have to pay him. Already have Le'Veon Bell. There's a connection between him and Antonio Brown going back to their Steelers days. They obviously drafted Denzel Mims as well, but I still am not sold on their receiving core. I know the Adam Gase factor is sketchy. I don't think a lot of players like him, including Jamal Adams. But if an Antonio Brown could be brought in, again, on a cheaper, maybe more considering he'd be going to a less good team, Sam Darnold would have a real number one option, and you could really see Sam Darnold flourish and potentially make the playoffs in the AFC, considering there's an extra spot, and maybe if the Bills took a step back, the Jets, could really win a wide open division if they signed somebody like Antonio Brown, even though I do not believe it is likely at all. That's going to wrap it up for this segment. Thank you guys so much for listening so far. We're going to be taking another break. On the other side of this, Michael Bennett said something really interesting about his former quarterback and former teammate, Carson Wentz. I'm going to be getting into that next as well. Thank you guys so much for listening so far, and we're going to take this quick break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Just got finished talking about some Antonio Brown, and earlier in the show I also talked about Adam Gase, Jamal Adams, New York Jets. We're going to continue with the football going on here, and Michael Bennett said a really interesting quote. I believe it was on the Pat McAfee show. He said, first of all, Michael Bennett played for the Eagles the year they won the Super Bowl, I believe, when Nick Foles was the quarterback in the Super Bowl. Carson Wentz had an incredible year, was an MVP candidate that year before tearing his ACL. Michael Bennett said that he believes, and he says that it's a fact, that Nick Foles is a better quarterback than Carson Wentz. And first off, I just want to say respect to Michael Bennett. He's a great player, was a great player for the Eagles, obviously. Amazing defensive player. But he's wrong, because Carson Wentz is a far and away better quarterback than Nick Foles. In every single fashion of the game of football, Carson Wentz is a better NFL quarterback, and I don't understand the Carson Wentz hate. And I used to think that Russell Wilson was the most underrated quarterback in the league. Now I think it's Carson Wentz. The Carson Wentz hate has gone too far, in my opinion. I talked about this a little bit last episode with the overrated, underrated NFL QBs. I'm gonna really do a deep dive into Carson Wentz right here. Carson Wentz, as an NFL starter, is 32-24. He has a career completion percentage of 64%. Career total yards is 14,191. 97 touchdowns to only 35 interceptions, almost a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Elite numbers. You cannot do much better than that. Won the division last year despite his top receivers, for the most part, were Greg Ward, Nelson Aguilar, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and they also led the league in drops. Though those three were Carson Wentz's main receivers last year. Yes, he had Ertz. Yes, he had Goddard. Yes, he had Miles Sanders out in the backfield. I'm not saying that the Eagles were completely trash, surrounded all around Carson Wentz, but their receiving core was terrible, especially after Alshon Jeffrey went down. And Carson Wentz won the division despite the Cowboys having a better roster. I don't want to hear it that Dak Prescott is better than Carson Wentz. He's not. Some people think that Carson Wentz isn't the best quarterback in his own division. Carson Wentz, at every single aspect of the game of football, is better than Nick Foles, and he's better than Dak Prescott, except for maybe injury concerns. And yes, Carson Wentz does get hurt a lot. Yes, that is a potential concern going forward with his career. But that is something that is out of his control. He cannot control how his body reacts to hits. He is not frail by any stretch of the imagination. I kind of compare him to Brett Favre, the way he used to play. That gunslinger, take those big hits to make a play mentality. And does it get Carson Wentz hurt? Absolutely. He's had a back problem. He obviously tore his ACL. He got a concussion last year on a cheap hit, which I don't count as anything, because once you get a concussion in the NFL, you're obviously done. And that's exactly how it should be. But Carson Wentz is also only going to get better. Hasn't even reached his prime yet in the NFL. And I think he's just criminally underrated. He is one of the best quarterbacks when the play breaks down. He is only behind Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes in that category. I mentioned this in my last episode when it's a multiple read play. So when the first play breaks down, usually how the NFL works is or really how football works. The coach will design a play. If it's a pass play, it's usually intended for a certain receiver who runs the hot route, and they are the number one option on that play. When that guy is not open, Carson Wentz is top 3 in the NFL at still finding another guy, at still making a play, still getting a first down. Only Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson get more first downs than Carson Wentz, only get more yardage than Carson Wentz, really. And yes, I understand, he gets hurt. Durability is an issue. But that is not the sole reason why Carson Wentz isn't good. Or if you think Carson Wentz is not an elite quarterback because of his availability concerns, then you really need to start watching him play. Because he's absolutely carrying the Philadelphia Eagles offense and really the entire organization. That defense was phenomenal during the Super Bowl and has been deteriorating ever since. They're kind of trying to revamp and retool this roster to continue on. There is a reason why the smart people who own the Philadelphia Eagles, the smart coach who won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles, Doug Peterson, decided to move on from Nick Foles and pay Carson Wentz. We should not act like we know more than these good football minds who actually work with the guys one-on-one. This is not a shot to Nick Foles. What he did is absolutely incredible. He has one of the most interesting stories in NFL history of going from this backup superstar and then now kind of drifting in kind of the football mediocrity. He's got one of the coolest stories ever, and I think he will succeed in Chicago. And again, he is a good player. He's good with his pocket. He's good with the pocket presence. He's more of a thrower down the field. Likes to throw the jump ball a lot. Nick Foles is a great quarterback. He's an okay quarterback. He's in that tier of the Ryan Tannehills, the Dak Prescotts even though I don't think he's as talented, where he can win, again, with multiple players around them, a good defense, a good coach, things like that. And I think he'll start to get some of that in Chicago. But that's one of the reasons why Nick Foles won the Super Bowl in Philly. And what he did was absolutely magical. But if you honestly believe, if Carson Wentz had stayed healthy that season, and instead of tearing his ACL, had continued on in the playoffs, the Eagles would have won the Super Bowl and Carson Wentz would have won Most Valuable Player. That's exactly what would have happened. And I think that we underestimate that. I think we underestimate the narrative of Carson Wentz versus Nick Foles. I can't speak on Carson Wentz's leadership. I know some players, and there have been some reports that Nick Foles was a better leader, better galvanizing of the troops. Well, I thought I saw a huge step in leadership and taking assertiveness last year when every single position almost had an injury last year for the Philadelphia Eagles. Jordan Howard got hurt for a little bit of time. Alshon Jeffrey went down. The defense was getting hurt. And instead of kind of tanking the season and just playing, going through the motions until the season was over because it was hopeless, Nick Foles, and who was not, the Eagles were not winning the division at that point. It was for the Cowboys. Beat out the Cowboys after having an amazing end to the season. And honestly, if he didn't get hurt in the playoff game, there's a real shot they could have won that potential playoff game as well. And I think the fact that Carson Wentz is just viewed as this, like Mr. Glass type of quarterback. Yes, he gets hurt. Every quarterback gets hurt. Patrick Mahomes got hurt last year. More quarterbacks will get hurt. And I'm not saying that Carson Wentz will stay healthy for the rest of his career. But if you could guarantee me a quarterback like Carson Wentz, with his talent, with his ability, with his resume, and he would miss 2 games every year. Assuming those games aren't in the playoffs, he misses 2 games every year. Let's say Carson Wentz misses the first 2 weeks of every year for the rest of his NFL career. I would still take him, and I would still sign him to the extension that Philly did. I looked it up. His contract is not terribly expensive, given his talent. It is one of the top 5 most valued contracts in the league, according to PFF. He does not make a lot of money given his skills, and I really do believe he is an MVP type player. I don't know if he's a top 5 quarterback in the league, but you can certainly make that argument. He's one of the better young quarterbacks in the league. I think he's the future of the league. And again, what he does with his arm and his feet is absolutely exceptional. When the pocket breaks down, Carson Wentz, who's not the most athletic guy when running, kind of laterally, he's not as fast as a Lamar Jackson, as a Michael Vick, even as a Russell Wilson. He's got more of that, kind of scramble around, gunslinger, push people off him that Brett Favre had, obviously. I just made that comparison. That Ben Roethlisberger had in his prime as well. And he just makes guys work, makes guys open, throws guys open. And that is the difference between a Nick Foles and a Carson Wentz. Nick Foles is great. He'll throw the jump ball. There's one of the reasons why Nick Foles always throws the jump ball is because he thrives when there's good receivers. Good receivers go get the jump ball. That is why Nick Foles is known as this, he throws the jump ball. He gives the receivers a chance. He's always trusting his guys. That's because that's what he does, because he can't make it on his own. He can't throw guys open. Throwing guys open is when the guy is completely covered. Do you put it in the one spot where the defender can't get it and the receiver can? And all Carson Wentz does is do that. All Carson Wentz does is take Greg Ward, Nelson Aguilar, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and his receiving core that led the league in drops to the playoffs, beating out Dak Prescott, beating out Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper, DeMarcus Lawrence, Byron Jones was on that team last year as well. Van Der Esch, everybody. He beat the Dallas Cowboys. And you think, and there are people who really believe that Dak Prescott is better than Carson Wentz. Why did Dak Prescott miss the playoffs last year? Why did Carson Wentz beat him out? Did you think Philly had a better roster? Because with all the injuries, they definitely didn't. Now they're trying to revamp. They're trying to retool. This is another point with Dak Prescott and why it's so hard for the Eagles to pay him, right? Or not the Eagles, the Cowboys. Another one of the reasons why, if they switch, right? You know who deserves $45 million a year? Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz would deserve $45 million a year. If you think the Cowboys wouldn't right now trade Dak Prescott for Carson Wentz, you're lying to yourself. Carson Wentz is supremely and far away better than Nick Foles and Dak Prescott. I'm not trying to discredit what Dak Prescott has done. He's got a great record. I'm not trying to discredit what Nick Foles did, that Super Bowl run. But what Carson Wentz does with his arm, his feet, his escapability, his ability to throw guys open is really second to none. Last year, he is the quarterback that made the most with less. And that is the difference between a good quarterback and a great quarterback. Even a great quarterback to an all-time talent type quarterback. And he's going to be a Philadelphia Eagles quarterback for a long time. I don't care that they drafted Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was obviously drafted as an insurance policy for Carson Wentz if he got hurt, right? Similar to why the Eagles loved having Nick Foles around. But Jalen Hurts is no threat to Carson Wentz's starting quarterback position. And he'll really be used as a gadget player as well. And I like Jalen Hurts. I liked him as a prospect. I thought he was good. I didn't expect Philly to take him, obviously. But I like him. But again, Carson Wentz is massively, massively underrated. These stats, again, 32-24 as a starter, 64% completion percentage, 14,000 yards, 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. All he does is win games with less talent around him. The 1 year that Carson Wentz had immense and supreme talent around him on the offensive and defensive end, that team went to the Super Bowl. And honestly, Carson Wentz should have been the MVP of that season as well. That's how good that roster was. Now, with less, he's still making the playoffs, and he will win the division again next year, most likely. They've kind of retooled. Jalen Reagor, who I like, I don't love. Hopefully the receivers can kind of step up for Carson Wentz. I think they'll get Deshaun Jackson back. I don't know what the Alshon Jeffrey situation's looking like. There's rumors that he might be traded. But again, the best quarterback in that division is Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is a top 5 quarterback in the NFC, probably a top 3 quarterback in the NFC, and probably a top 7 quarterback in the league. And he hasn't even hit his prime yet. Which is the scary part. All right, that is going to do it for this segment. On the other side of the break, I'm going to be giving you guys my top 10 NBA teams to end off the show. Thank you guys so much for listening so far, and we'll be back right after this break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Thank you so much for tuning in all the way through the last segment of the episode. And for this last segment, I'm going to be giving you guys my top 10 NBA teams. I've done a lot of NBA lists, top 10 NBA players, top 10 NBA younger players I also have done. I've also done a tier list of who I believe are championship contenders and who are not. But I've never actually given a concrete top 10 NBA teams in the league today. So I'm going to be giving you guys that right now. This is not East and West. It's both combined. Just my top 10 teams in the league. And let's start off with number 10. At number 10, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. They would be a lot higher. I've mentioned this before. They've just never reached the true potential of their team. I like Ben Simmons. I love Joel Embiid. I think Brett Brown is actually a decent coach. And I really do believe the Sixers have done a great job of building a roster of those three. I just think that this year in particular, with the roster, they might have screwed it up. I don't think there's enough shooters on this team. This league is a shooter-driven league. The NBA is all about shooting now from the outside. JJ Redick left, Jimmy Butler, who's a decent shooter, left, and they replaced him with Al Horford, who is an okay shooter, but that's not his main game. The main part of Horford's game is the mid-range, back to the basket type of stuff, and that doesn't also really mix with Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons. They have enough guys in the paint as it is. It's a cluttered team. I don't see a lot of spacing with it, which is why I have them at number 10. The reason why they did make the top 10 over some other teams like the Pacers, for example, is I still believe in Philadelphia 76ers talent. I believe in Ben Simmons. I believe in Joel Embiid. And I think that star power puts them over the edge of some of the other teams. So at number 10, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. At number 9, I have the Utah Jazz, who I love. I absolutely love Donovan Mitchell. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the league now. I think he should have won Rookie of the Year that year. I think he's a younger version of Dwayne Wade. I don't know if he's as good as Dwayne Wade, obviously. The play style, the leadership, the drivenness, the sort of one-man show I see for him there. I love Donovan Mitchell, and that's why they're on this top 10 list. I think Rudy Gobert and him are a great 1-2 punch. I do fear that Rudy Gobert will be, kind of played off the floor in the playoffs, as a lot of, back to the basket, rim running, shot blocking centers are. But again, Rudy Gobert's an absolute wall, and he's one of the best, if not the best, rim runner, back to the basket, shot blocking big in the league. And I trust Donovan Mitchell a lot, which is why I have them at top 10. They would be a lot higher if Mike Conley had shown me something this year. He's shown big regression. He was always consistent and really great for the Memphis Grizzlies. I don't really know what happened this year, why he took such a big step back production-wise. I think he might be even coming off the bench now. But again, this team is still a good team. I think they're top 4 or 5 in the West this year. Again, I love Donovan Mitchell, Spider Mitchell, and I think that's why I have them at number 9. But they're, because of their lack of, talent around him, Bogdan Bogdanovic is obviously hurt. If he was healthy, they'd be higher too. So with no Bogdanovic, Rudy Gobert could get played off the floor in the playoffs, and the lack of Mike Conley production, I have the Utah Jazz coming in there at number 9. Number 8, I have the Miami Heat. I absolutely love the Heat. I love everything they've done this year. I think they're a year ahead of their rebuild process. I just don't think that they're as good as, some of the other teams in the East and the West. I don't think they're a top, 5 or even top 7 team in the league. I think the Heat are one of the better defensive teams in the league. I love Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson. They're kind of the opposite of Philly. The Miami Heat had the perfect match of, paint players and shooters. They had Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler for the paint, and then shooters, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, some other guys, Kelly Olynyk as well, Myers Leonard. That allows them to have a perfect blend. I just think they're a year or two away just for those young guys to develop, or like a piece or two away from being a championship contender, like I've mentioned. And due to their lack of playoff experience, the Heat have obviously made the playoffs a ton in the last 20 years, ever since they've been kind of created. But a lot of players on this team do not have the playoff experience. It's really just Jimmy Butler, Goran Dragic, Udonis Haslem, some guys like that. Otherwise, I would have them a little bit higher. I think they're just a year or two or a piece or two away. I think Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn, they're all still pretty raw, talented guys. So I have them coming in at number 8. At number 7, I have the Denver Nuggets. One of my favorite players in the league is Jokic. He's one of the best and most fun centers to watch. He's lost a ton of weight. I don't know if you guys have seen the pictures recently circulating around social media. It looks like he's dropped 35 plus pounds is what people have been saying. He looks like a completely different human being. It's going to be kind of crazy to see if Jokic will show off some of his, more true athleticism now that he's in better shape, which would be absolutely crazy. Because right now Jokic is probably the best or second best shooting big in the league, best passing big in the league by far. His issue has always been kind of like stamina, shape, conditioning, things like that, and his kind of lack of athleticism has kind of held him back from being, one of the top 5 players in the NBA versus what he is now, which is probably a top 10 to 12 player in the NBA. But if Jokic, since he's lost this weight, has kind of shown, been hiding this athleticism from us, and now he runs the floor, he dunks, things like that, grabs more rebounds, he could be a really special player in this league, and that could catapult the Nuggets up to championship contender level. I love other tweets about the Nuggets as well. I love Jamal Murray. I think he's one of the most underrated point guards in the league as well. But again, I like Mike Malone, the coach, as well. But Jokic is really the face of the franchise there in Denver, and that's why I have him at number 7. He's the modern NBA big that you want when building a franchise around. There's a lot of players that I would want to build a franchise around. Jokic is definitely up there just because of his pure passing ability, his shooting ability, things like that. And who knows if we'll see a new and improved Jokic once the Orlando bubble kicks off July 30th. At number 6, I have the Toronto Raptors. If Kawhi Leonard were still on this team, that would be a completely different story. They'd probably be up there in the top 3. I love everything about the Raptors. I love Nick Nurse. I love Pascal Siakam. Fred VanVleet took a huge jump this year. I just don't see Pascal Siakam being the best player on a championship team. I think he's a fantastic, co-star, a B to somebody's a Robin to somebody's Batman, something like that. And that's what he was for Kawhi Leonard, and is obviously why it worked out so well. In Toronto, they obviously won the championship. Again, Nick Nurse should definitely get some Coach of the Year votes. He already won it last year. I think Toronto's the best defensive team in the league, number 1 or number 2. Maybe the Lakers are up there as well, Clippers too, Bucks. But the way that the Raptors play at home, especially, they're going to be a tough out in the playoffs. I just think they do lack a little bit of star power in comparison to some of the other teams I'm going to mention above them. So the Toronto Raptors are coming in there at number 6. At number 5, I have the Houston Rockets, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, who I've talked about at length on this show. Again, I think it's a big prove-it playoffs for both Harden and Westbrook. They have that narrative that they are not clutch in the playoffs, that they don't win the big game, that they don't perform at the biggest stage. Now, I think they have a chance to kind of disprove that this year with two birds with one stone. If Houston could get to a Western Conference Finals, especially, they don't have to win a championship to end that narrative, but I want to see James Harden and Russell Westbrook win a Game 7 on the road, or even at home, or just anybody really, on a Game 7 level. We've seen James Harden throw up these incredible numbers, 38, 39 points, 40-point games. Russell Westbrook with his triple-doubles. I want to see it on the biggest stage. I want to see it against the Lakers in a crucial game. I want to see it against the Clippers. Again, one of the reasons why Houston is so high on my list, even though they're not even top 5 in the West, is because of how talented they are, because of how gifted offensively James Harden is. And an interesting point about this, Orlando bubble playoffs is that not only have the players, taken such a large break from playing the game of basketball, but referees have taken such a large break from watching the game of basketball. So usually in the playoffs, the whistle gets a little bit tighter. Who knows how that will go this year? It might be more like regular season officiating in the league this year. Rules could be changed, the NBA, things like that. Who knows how these games are going to be played, and I think that could definitely benefit James Harden as well. Obviously, the three-point shooting, he's also lost some weight, it appears. He looks to be in really good shape, so it's going to be really interesting to see. That's why I have number 5, the Houston Rockets. At number 4, I have the Boston Celtics. Again, the Celtics would be higher on this list. Top 4 is obviously incredible. I think they're the only team in the East that has a shot at making the finals outside of the Milwaukee Bucks. I absolutely love Jason Tatum. There is a good chance that Jason Tatum becomes the best player in the NBA within the next 3 to 5 years, and it's his, kind of replacement of the LeBron of the best player when he retires. He's so gifted offensively. He reminds me of a bigger, not bigger in length, but bigger in muscle and strength version of Kevin Durant. He can score from anywhere on the floor. He's a great passer. He's a good wing defender as well. I think if Kemba Walker really steps up in these playoffs and does better than he did in the regular season, then the Celtics could really make some noise and make the playoffs. I love Marcus Smart. Love Jaylen Brown. I love Brad Stevens, the coach, and it would really be cool, in my opinion, to see a Lakers-Celtics finals. But I have the Celtics at number 4. Again, they're very gifted offensively. I think they're still a little bit young and raw. Otherwise, they could be ahead of a Milwaukee, a Clippers, a Lakers, who I'll get to in a little bit. But for that to happen, I really need Kemba Walker to take a step up and be better than he was during the regular season. At number 3, I have the Milwaukee Bucks. I think they're probably going to come out of the East. I think Giannis is the second best player in the world behind LeBron James. I think he can do everything for Milwaukee, but again, he needs to win a championship soon. Otherwise, that narrative that Russell Westbrook has, that James Harden has, that they can't win in the big moment, that's going to, kind of cloud over Giannis soon if he does not win. But again, I love the Bucks. I think Mike Budenholzer was a perfect coaching hire after Jason Kidd obviously left Milwaukee. If Giannis can just improve his three-point shooting, he could definitely be the best player in this league if he isn't already. Again, Brook Lopez, Kyle Korver on that team, I think. Eric Bledsoe, Chris Middleton, just a lot of guys. They have the playoff experience now. It would not surprise me at all if this was the Bucks' year to come out of the East, and I think that is the bar for them. I really do believe it's championship or bust. I think Milwaukee fans, even the Milwaukee organization, and Giannis in particular, is kind of sick and tired of getting bounced in the second round or bounced in the conference finals. I think it's time to make a championship. They don't have to win it necessarily, but they definitely need to get to a championship, get to the NBA Finals this year for the Bucks for it to be considered, I think, a successful season. At number 2, I have the Los Angeles Clippers, barely behind the Los Angeles Lakers. I love everything about the Clippers. I think that the rest will serve them well. No more load management, obviously, in the playoffs. No more injuries. Everybody's healthy. Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, Zubac, Kawhi, PG, Doc Rivers, championship experience head coach, Steve Ballmer, owner. I love every single thing about the Los Angeles Clippers. They have really done as best as they can to start making it a Clippers town. Unfortunately, the Lakers are still kind of dominating right now. But again, I love everything about the Clippers. Would not surprise me at all if they were a championship team. Definitely the second best team in the league, in my opinion, and I am expecting a Western Conference Finals matchup with the number 1 team in the league, in my opinion, the Los Angeles Lakers. It is their year. I've mentioned this time and time again. The stars are aligning for the Lakers to finally get back to the top, finally get an NBA championship. They have the best player in the world, LeBron James, one of the best players in the world, Anthony Davis. Avery Bradley actually announced that he was not going to be coming back this year, so that's kind of a big hit, and it almost made me have the Clippers number 1, but I do think LeBron James will pull through without an Avery Bradley. I think they'll sign somebody like a J.R. Smith, in my opinion, to take over that role. Dion Waiters was obviously acquired right before kind of the shutdown happened, so who knows what he will look like when they get back. So they do have some more shooting around LeBron now, and that has always been LeBron's thing, driving and kicking. He's reinvented himself this year as a point guard. I think he'll take even more assertiveness with the offense once the playoff starts. It'll really be a two-man. If you thought it was a two-man game now with AD and LeBron, wait till you see the playoffs when it's just pick and roll after pick and roll with those two, and it is so deadly and so hard for other teams to contain. I think the Los Angeles Lakers are going to win the championship this year. Again, like I've said, the stars are aligning, and they are my number one team in the NBA. That is going to wrap it up for this episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really do appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, and follow us and interact with us on all those social media platforms that you have. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all in the next episode.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.